I would like to invite our session chair for this panel, Atul Satija, to join the stage. Atul is the founder and the head of the Nudge Foundation, which is an organization that has been really at it to drive the end of poverty in India and has made a huge impact over, well, the last decade or so. And I think what's really powerful about their model is that they have worked with well over 100 philanthropists, they've worked with over 150 entrepreneurs, and so they really bring the best of a multidisciplinary, many people to attack one problem approach to their work. So Atul will be chairing this panel. I would also like to invite our speakers for this panel, Prashanth Prakash, who Atul will introduce, Latha, and I'm getting your last name, I'm so sorry, goodness. Latha Rajnikanth, I'm sorry for not butchering your last name, and Arun Jain, if you could please join us up on stage. You want them to sit in the name? Okay. Hi, good to see you. Long time. So I think they want you to sit in the order. You're here. Sit here.
Thank you, Shweta, and good afternoon, everyone. The topic of this session is the journey of generosity. And it is very apt because no philanthropy straightaway starts with a big check. It starts with a question, a discomfort, something that you observe that just leaves, refuses to leave you. And over the last 11 years, I've had a chance to work with a large number of philanthropists. And one thing that I have observed with all of them is what stays with you is not how much they give, but what they really stand for and how they give and how they approach giving. So I hope that in this session, we are actually able to cover philanthropy, cover giving, cover generosity as a journey, and not necessarily as just check writing. We have a very wonderful panel here. All three of them have approached giving and generosity from very, very different angles. And I hope that makes the conversation very, very rich. Latha Rajnikanth ji has approached giving from a very compassion and values-based lens through her work with Shree Dayaa Foundation, working with a lot of kids and education. We have Arun here. After building Polaris, he's been involved in giving in many, many different ways. Started Polaris Foundation while he was still there, allocated capital from his previous organization and has been running Polaris Foundation that supports mission Samriddhi over a long period of time now. A lot of systems thinking, design thinking goes into his work. And Prashanth Prakash, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for many, many years now, has been a huge contributor to the startup ecosystem of India. Needs no introduction in his work in that area. But I have seen Prashanth's journey only from his philanthropy and giving side, with his work with Shikshana Foundation, Krishi Kalpa, ACT grants during COVID, and also the support that he provides to the work that we do at the Nudge. So thank you so much for taking the time and welcome everyone. Let me start this conversation by asking a question to all of you. How did your giving journey started? And what was the trigger and how has it evolved over the years? Maybe we can start with you, Prashanth.
Yeah. So in my case, I had just finished my first stint as an entrepreneur. And after that, I'd gotten into just venture capital. And it was about 1-2 years into venture capital. And I started to see entrepreneurs coming into the company building phase in the commercial world. But I think it's around that time that I started to see that, you know, the type of companies that are being built were very different and in a different era compared to the NGO ecosystem that existed in the country, right? So it was, it's almost like they were like 3-4 generations behind, and so it was that feeling that there had to be reimagination in some sense of the impact ecosystem that you talked about systems thinking and outcome orientation, scale orientation. All of those were totally missing. And that's what really got me into it. And over time, I saw that a lot of learnings from the venture ecosystem, from the startup ecosystem, were exactly what this country needed, both to scale philanthropy, because I don't think we have made enough progress. And Atul, you really grapple with some of this in what you're doing. I think we have very little time to really make change happen in this country. And what we have done in the startup ecosystem in the last 10, 15, 20 years, the traditional industry took 50 years. So why can't we in the next 25 years create that kind of impact, was where this has evolved. So it's about little bit being not just a giver, but being a collaborator, being somebody who can build institutions, support building of, be catalytic in building institutions, and finally bring in more risk capital. So over a period of time now, I've started to see that that's really what we need. Yeah. So it's kind of evolved in terms of what I have been doing in this space.
I think we touched upon the need for risk capital, mistake capital, failure capital in the nonprofit space, and I think that's what I've learned you brought into this ecosystem. Arun?
I'll share two incidents. When we started Polaris in 1993, and we were 40 people with a dream, with 100,000 revenue on the books, we look at it, what we want to achieve and what dreams should be, and we set up Polaris. But that time we decided that we'll contribute 2% of our revenue, not CSR now, but 93, to social impact programs where employee of the Polaris will participate themselves by committing their time and 2% equity. That's the first time when we brought Ullas Trust as an area where each employee of the Polaris will mentor a child, so that every employee, if he does it, so at least we take care of the 10,000 children every year. So that was the first way where we experienced it. Then in 2014 and 2015, when I looked at it, when I wanted to work on product company and I sold off Polaris, that is the second moment where I looked at it, philanthropy differently, because I got some money, I put it to Polaris Foundation and then started Mission Samriddhi. But the idea was that how do we contribute into the whole thing? And the turning point was, there was some Gandhian came to my home and he was saying, talking about Vardha, and then we visited Yavatmal, which is the most suicide-prone zone of India. That why somebody gets into the problem of suicide, that's the ultimate issue. We visited there for 7 days and with 10, 15 people. And that is a turning point that, is it a school which is important, or is it a hospital which is important, something else is, which is the rural India, to understand rural India. And that's where the entire new thinking process evolved, that if I'm using design thinking for generating my software products, which is world-class software products, why can't I use design thinking to solve rural India problem? I didn't have an answer because I didn't know rural India itself, because I was novice in that area. The first time I experienced rural India, it took me 3 years for me to understand with various NGOs, various development, I call it development accelerator. Anybody who participates, I don't call NGO or government, I call it development accelerators. And all the development accelerator, I did some 40, 50 design thinking workshops to come to the point. So that is the trigger point for me to understand this space.
Your journey, Latha ji.
Namaskar to everybody. Thank you for having me here. I come from a background of giving, because to me giving is part of my upbringing. And it's not because you have that you give. I think it's an instinctive approach to life that we're all built in from our childhood. My parents didn't give because they had so much, but because they wanted to. I found every person around me giving not because they had enough, but they wanted to. So I think we also have to learn a lot from children, because they are not industrialists, they're not business people, they are not entrepreneurs, but still, when there's a biscuit in the hand of a child The child wants to break it and give it to the child who's crying. So there's a lot we have to learn around us. And so I grew up in that atmosphere of giving. So to me, when I got married, from day one, it was connect with the common people, with everyone who was visiting us. So I expanded my world into a larger family where I started meeting a lot of people and connected myself socially to the needs of people, which starts from the basics of living, basics of eating, basics of medicine, basics of schooling, and pregnant women, children, everyone. We cannot really categorize who needs help because everybody who's underprivileged, less privileged than us, needs that help. And what I feel through my experience of 50 years of public life is we all need to be connected in some way because there is quite a big divide between the north and south of India, and we don't find much coming towards the south side because as somebody spoke about Jharkhand and Bihar, I wish you can include Tamil Nadu in that. So I come from Tamil Nadu, and so I think the best way is to feel connected, and also it has to percolate where it goes, and it has to actually support causes which are happening and the vision of people who want to do. And I think that's the kind of giving I come from. And we're individuals, we're not industrialists, we're not business people, we are not entrepreneurs yet. I've become an entrepreneur now. I've started my startup with a very special entity for India called Bharat Market. But I'm an educationist and I run my foundation. So that's where my giving comes from. I'm connected to the people naturally and on an everyday basis.
One of the things you mentioned, Lataji, is that when you go to a child who doesn't have too much, the still instinct is to actually break the biscuit and give it to the child next to you. Through my work at Give India, we have done surveys with a large number of retail donors, and we saw that we assume that when people have more money, they give more. But what we found was actually almost an inverted pyramid, that people who have the least live in most interdependent societies and in more interdependent manner, and people give a lot more even when they have less, which was very counterintuitive to me at the time. But now when you say that, it kind of makes a lot of sense. So thank you for that. Prashanth, you talked about the fact that you had done a lot in the venture world. You got a Padma Shri for that to build the entire ecosystem. When you moved to the philanthropic ecosystem, started investing in nonprofits with the same mindset, obviously a lot of things you were expecting to bring it to this ecosystem that you did. But there are also some things that you learned along the way that surprised you that you have to unlearn while helping the nonprofits?
So the first learning, and I think Iqbal spoke a little bit about that, the ability to scale. Here, I mean, if you kind of trained in the venture ecosystem, don't work with the government, don't do anything with the government, you kind of just have that kind of mindset. So the first thing you kind of have to learn is that the risk capital is going to go into experiment, get early product market fit, but then it's only by working with the government that you can scale. So, the ability to network here does not mean networking for capital. It's about how do you network with the government. So it's the importance of the role of government for scaling was, I think, the first kind of shift in mindset. The second shift is also the availability of capital in venture is always for spaces that are less explored. It's if it's a very new space, if there's not a lot, if there is novelty in that space, that's what attracts a lot of capital in the venture world. But when I got into this whole NGO space, it's like if you solve the same problem that 10 other NGOs were solving, that's what got capital. So risk-taking and innovation had the least amount of capital when it came to the impact world, or when it came to societal impact. So that was a big learning. So it was about how do you bring in when people are, when you want entrepreneurs who are thinking different in this world, but then these entrepreneurs are not going to get capital because everybody is like betting on the same old stuff, right? So that was the second big thing. And the third, I think, like in a lot of, we had not seen a lot of deep tech in those days in India, but the time frames, right? So we were looking at startups in India going from whatever 0 to 1 and 1 to exit 7 years, 8 years. But it was clear that in this world you're talking much longer timelines, to much longer horizons. So I would say these three would be the thing. And maybe the final thing I'll say is lack of role models. In the venture world, there were role models in Silicon Valley. You could look at them and say, okay, if I'm building a startup in India, or there's somebody from US coming in, partnering with somebody here in Bangalore and building a startup. But we had absolutely, when these, what I call as, social enterprises or this next generation of enterprises, had absolutely no role models that they could look up to and work with. Yeah, so lots of new.
So the scarce risk capital, ability to scale with the government.
Not a real understanding of scale in the ecosystem. I think the fragmentation, I mean, you've heard of, I think we had more NGOs in this country than anybody else in the world, because everything was fragmented where everybody worked with a very small piece, and there was no thinking for scale. And that was the status quo when we got started 10 years ago.
Yeah. I think it's starting to change. We have role models like rocket learning that
yeah,
talked about.
I think that's because the whole, I think the platformization of how things need to get built is what has happened in the last 4 or 5 years. So these platforms have come up. With platforms also, you get in more capital. So, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
We now have a Magsaysay winner in Educate Girls and others before that as well, but a lot of role models emerging now. Arun, you have talked about trying to bring design thinking into rural development in particular, and you have talked about holistic rural development. You have mentioned that 10 more schools won't fix India, but if we get integrated rural development holistically done in India, we have a chance to solve for poverty at large scale. What has been your sort of key insights from your work on the ground?
I'll just continue from Prashanth. Scale is important. So scale, platform is important. For platform, we need to understand the deeper issues at a ground level. So if I look at design thinking, I say Sarpanch, who is leading the village, is a stakeholder. He is my primary starting point to understand his persona and build design thinking behind it. Now, I have to need to work on his darshan, because if I like my Hindu philosophy, darshan, gyan, charitra. If you want to change the character of somebody, you need to change their thinking first, then his knowledge will change, and from knowledge, the character will change. So that darshan is nothing but design thinking. And if that has to be worked on, if I take that as a central persona, then I'm seeing there are more NGOs which are there, which are fragmented on one side, but more than NGO which is on that side, the other thing is there are 24 sectoral intervention. So many ministries goes to impact 3,000 people village, and one sarpanch without a capacity and capability to understand what the development is all about. So we found the weakest link in the chain is that bottom-up understanding of 37 different initiatives one can change. After a lot of work, we identified there are 5 development blocks which I can separate. Development block 1 is personal leadership at a village level, which is a development block 1. Development block 2 is social development. The social development means D21 means education, D22 means healthcare, D23 means infrastructure, D24 means equality and equity. These are my social. Then I come to the D3 block, which is the economic development block, which is a D31 is agriculture related and agriculture productivity, and then D32 means agriculture allied industries within the village, and then you look at it value addition, and then you look at SHG, and then you look at FPO, and then you look at financial sector. So that becomes a D3 block. And then D4 is ecology, climate, natural resources, forest management, all are part of D4 block. And then you come to D5 block, which is most critical, is institutional development block, where how do you run the Gram Panchayat, how do you do the planning, how do you get the government resources to be pulled in for the development of the block, how do you pull in the resources from the other sectors. So I think this D1 to D5 framework, when we took, it took 3 years to design the framework, but once it is coming in, we just deployed it in a very structured shape where we put one cluster with a unit of 15,000 population and having a full-time person deployed to run this platform over the 36 months plus 24 months. So 5-year program, 36 months program where we do each intervention month on month. We just introduce one intervention like a typical project plan. And then after the last 2 years, we'll do economic development. So first 1 year is nothing related to economic, but related to the personal development, like Samriddhi Yatra, go take them to different village and role modeling village and inspire them to get to their job. And then you do social development by connecting from primary education to middle education, but not necessarily by ourselves. We work with 116 different development accelerators and fund through them, work across 10 states, and we use a principle of celebrate what is happening best in the country, pick it up, connect them together, with, whether geographically or by the competency, and then catalyze them. So celebrate, connect, and catalyze is the principle of Mission Samriddhi, and Mission Samriddhi then is an anchoring piece. And the core piece is coming from the design thinking, that we invite them to design thinking workshop, boundaryless thinking. So idea is, how do you enable their thinking process, expand their thinking process from their 200 square feet of thinking to 2,000 square feet of thinking. If thinking space expands, they can do it themselves. And I feel the current issue of subsidy is counterintuitive to the development, because as soon as you make somebody poor, you make him poor by giving something, rather than he become poor by thinking, not poor by physical assets what he has. And I think that's where the government forces and development forces are antithesis to each other. So that's what my insights are.
Lovely. Latha, as we have been hearing in this panel, and we also heard in the previous panel, a lot of development conversation is now about, do we have the right evidence? Do we have systems thinking? Do we have scale orientation? Do we have the risk appetite? Do we have the, do we work with the markets for scale, et cetera, et cetera? In all this, do you feel like the kind of philanthropy that comes from, here is a certain sort of a moral anchoring I have to do on the ground work, and like Iqbal said, right, there is need for, if kids are malnourished, please go and make kitchens and make sure everybody is fed. In this sort of CSR and new sort of kind of capital coming into the sector, is there a risk of the kind of work that you not being discussed enough?
I think a lot is based on theory and a text rather than humanity right now. We need a lot of humaneness in our approach to giving. If world leaders came together, there should be no poverty in the world. But we do have areas of attention which is required in every part of the world, and we have leaders across the globe, but still we have these pockets which are constantly there, which means there's something wrong with our approach to progress and to advancement. It's not just about being theoretical, formal, or going into accounts as CSR in branding and things like that. It's a lot more to do with how human are you. And I think ancient India, we didn't have people who wanted to receive because everything was there and there was a lot of employment. There was a lot of giving from everybody. So there was enough for everybody. But today there's a lot of thinking about where, what, how, and then there's a lot of theory going into giving also. So I think a lot is to being more human, understanding where work is happening and what needs to be supported. And we have to be part of that. And I think in any which way, we have to make sure that there's a lot of skill and employment that is constant in the world where we live. And that has to happen. Like I've started a very special project called Bharat Seva across Tamil Nadu and creating citizens platforms in every constituency of our region to get people together to understand what the local support is required, what local work is required for basic. We all live in a world where there's one part fighting for the basics and one wanting to improve. So we start with the basics and see that we need to be connected, and a lot of people must meet each other. Like we do not know the people here. I come from a place where the first time we are meeting, and all of you are doing such enormous work, and we don't have a point of connect unless there is a meet where we come. And here, we are not able to interact as much as we need to. So I think a lot of interaction is required in spreading the work that you're all doing to different parts of this country. And we have to make sure that India stays India in terms of its humanity and its philosophy.
Thank you, ma'am. One of the foundation CEOs I met 7-8 years back talked about this work as what he called value in itself philanthropy. Basically, he said that, look, if something happens to me and my child is an orphan, I do want orphanages. But why are kids becoming orphan at the scale at which they are? Why is it that overall life expectancy is low? You need to solve that problem, but that doesn't take away from the need to do the work that's required on the ground. I quite like that example. Thank you so much for bringing that tenderness and humanness in giving an ecosystem that we need.
Yes, we just like to say that we're making one model school, how education should be to a child who spends the whole day for 12 years inside a school. It should be a lot more about a child understanding himself or herself rather than just a formal education. It's core and emotional development that's important. We are busy developing one hospital, especially for children and wellness, where a child can feel less anxiety while they come inside. We are building a very special Bharat market for everything Indian that should not die in terms of hand skills and farmers produce. And we are doing Bharat Seva across Tamil Nadu. So these are the projects I'm busy building for the people.
Well, we have the last 4 minutes, and I have one question, very similar to what Shweta also requested the previous panel to do. India is actually enabling a lot of people to make wealth, but also make wealth very early in their careers as well. So given that a lot of people here might be reaching a certain milestone where they can start giving materially, what would be your advice from your experience over the last decades of your work in philanthropy that you would want to give them as they think about their giving? Prashanth?
So I think there is a new set of platforms, like we mentioned. I mean, Nudge is one platform, ACT, and a lot of people don't know that these platforms are not very alien to these founders, to these venture funds, to these people from the other commercial ecosystem in terms of how value gets created, how accountability gets ascribed in these platforms. So I think there needs to be a lot more exposure, because only when you have these platforms will risk capital follow, right? So I think it's very important that these founders can have an opportunity to build not only bring money, but bring that founder mindset to these platforms and contribute with that founder mindset and participate in these new social impact startups and bring money plus the founder mindset. So I think there is an opportunity, I think, in the next 5-10 years to build many ACT and Nudge-like platforms in this country and bring in at least, I would say, $500 million to $1 billion kind of capital in the short term, irrespective of CSR. CSR has a role to play, but I think it's used very differently. And that's the reason we need this kind of catalytic capital that energizes and creates more different accelerated value in the ecosystem.
So you're hopeful for $500 million to $1 billion of catalytic philanthropy
Capital has to happen in the next
coming
2
in.
years.
That's a great call to action and this thing. Arun?
Yeah. I would say to all of you, first of all, visit a village. Spend 2 days in a village to understand the village first before start the philanthropy. You need to know when I visited first time Yavatmal, I said how unlearned I am, and I am completely didn't know what India lives and what we are connecting to it. So that's the first point where the empathy will evolve, and that's why, and connect with the platform, what Prashanth is saying. I think these are the 2 points, two ends of the spectrum. One is the empathy originating in your mindset, and desire coming in your mindset. Even Karan was mentioning about it. It has to come, desire has to come from the inside. It's not it cannot be from outside. And desire can come only when you know what the problem is, what problem are you solving to understand the problem. So I would say connect the two. And there are enough number of people in the country where we can work together, have a celebrate, connect, and catalyze. We need a multiple platform like this, Indiaspora platform, where we can meet together to share the platform.
I can personally relate to that. My own journey of the impact sector started by visiting Mewat, which is a small, very lowest HDI indicator area at the border of Haryana and Rajasthan, when I turned 30. That was my personal thing to go and see, and that changed. 8 years later, I moved to the sector full time. Thank you for that. Latha ji?
My personal request to each and everyone who's here is, after this session, after we all go away to our respective locations, how do we stay connected? Is there a way in which everyone can always be there in some common platform where we can talk, we can realize, we can understand what we need to do in our respective regions and in the areas of interest that you have? The basic problem I find is connecting with people. Everyone is busy because they have their own course to do, but still, if you have the heart and the mindset to do something for the people and to the society, if we are able to stay connected and understand the work that each one is doing, it will help us a lot to move forward. And I think if corporate world comes together, entrepreneurs come together, and business people come together, it would make a big difference to a country or to a place or to the world. And that is very, very important, I feel. So if we are able to do that, and Bharat Seva is there to put anything together. And I should thank my husband because he's a philanthropist himself. And growing up with my parents and then being with my husband and my family, we are all there very, very open to listen to thoughts and ideas to develop whatever I can do in my region and to India and to the world. Thank you.
There are as many Rajnikanth fans here as there are about his philanthropy side for it. So you're both an inspiring couple, ma'am. Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so much.
Our time is up, but I was going to say that Indiaspora is the forum to make sure we are all connected at the end of this. It was not a plug they asked me to put, but yeah. I think to me, I think what I'm taking away from this conversation is that there is no one right way to do philanthropy or to give. Everybody has their own journey. I saw that everybody started with a personal conviction. It grew as we spent time on the ground and learned, make mistakes, unlearned, etc. But I think the long-term commitment emerges from the personal conviction. And it's great to hear your journeys. Personally, I think India is doing really well. Indiaspora is doing really well. And the question for us is not whether we get to, how much capital we raise, how much capital we give, but basically it's like, do we have the moral ambition, the public-spirited leadership, as well as the institutional patience and capital required to actually make the impact that we all want to see in the country. We won't get to 2047 with just economic growth. We want inclusive growth. And journeys like yours are very, very inspiring in that. So thank you so much for helping us think about it.
I'd just like to say one thing to the people here. I work with children, and it's a very special world. And they're much better people than us. There's a lot, I call them little people. And they have as much a world as we have. So I request each and every one of you to do something with me for the world of children. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks, everyone.